Immediately as you got fired or laid off, just take care of yourself. People skip this step very often, which is normal. You wake up in the morning, you got called to a surprise meeting at 9 a.m. With your boss, and then you enter, and then it's like, oh, wait a second, there's my boss, his boss, and HR. After that meeting, people tend to, oh, I need to start getting applications. I need to start getting my CV. They enter in this, reactive mode, which is normal. I'll do the same, but you need to take time to process this. This is a big punch. Your body is in stress, so you really need to take time to calm down, give yourself some days to process this. And I think this is a step that I see many people not doing, and just doing it in 3 weeks when they are totally exhausted and nervous, and nothing that they did really came to fruition because they were not in the right space.
Hi, Envisionaires. Welcome to the EnvisionAir Podcast. This is the podcast where we envision living our best lives filled with unlimited possibilities by exploring everyday topics related to health, wealth, community, and love. This podcast is for information purposes only and should not be considered to be medical, legal, tax, financial, or other professional advice.
This podcast does not encourage or endorse any illegal activity.
We are not responsible for any losses, damages, or liability that may arise from the information in this podcast.
The views explored in the podcast may not always be those of the host.
On today's episode, we're going to be exploring the wealth pillar of the podcast and diving deep into the realm of career changes and transitions. Because let's face it, sometimes we all feel a little bit stuck in our jobs. In fact, around 70% of all working age people that were polled are actively looking for a job change. So joining us today, someone is going to be helping to give us that nudge in the right direction, is the incredible Ricardo Brito, a life and work coach who specializes in helping people navigate career changes and uncover their true professional passions. We're going to be exploring burning questions like, how do you know when it's time for a career change? And what do you do when you're feeling stuck in your career and you're at a career crossroads? And how has the pandemic shifted our perspective on job security versus job satisfaction? And I hope that you're going to be gaining a lot of valuable insights and actionable tips with this episode. So a very warm welcome, Ricardo. Thank you so much for being on the EnvisionAir Podcast. Thank you.
Hi, Nicole. Thank you so much for having me here. I'm super excited to talk about these topics and also explain how meatballs helped my career transition and inspired how I work with people.
Okay, meatballs. Okay, this I had no idea about, but I like it. So let's start. Maybe let's start with that then. Why don't you start with that? Tell us how did meatballs impact your career?
Well, meatballs was my coping mechanism while I was during my burnout. To be honest, I've been working for at that point around 15 years, the last 10 in tech, and I was coming through a long tail of too much work, and that was 2021. So it has been like the year of the pandemic, and in 2021, January, I closed my laptop in the middle of a meeting, and I just said, I can't do this anymore.
Wow.
And then I'm not sure if you ever had a moment like that.
Well, did you just walk out or did you just?
Well, it was remote, so it's easy to walk out. You just shut down your laptop. And then the next 8 months was 8 months of recovering while I was rethinking my whole life and rethinking my whole profession. And I think that was part of my journey of what brought me here. And meatballs was one of my coping mechanisms to deal with not wanting to be near a computer, not going outside because it's Berlin and it's negative degrees and it's snow and it's a pandemic. And I started to sell meatballs from my kitchen. And that was then I realized that was part of my experiments to understand what's next in my career.
Oh my gosh, that's incredible. Okay. So, let's go back to when you shut the laptop down. what happened? Like, did you actually quit? Like, and you just gave your notice? That was it on that day? Or did you have to work a notice period and then eventually shift into selling meatballs?
No. So, well, in Germany, we there is a good health system. So I think one of the things I was looking for health support. Right.
Okay.
I was at my end. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't eat. I was super nervous all the time. I was feeling desperate. I couldn't understand what was next for me, but I couldn't work anymore. And I think that was very common for many people, right? Uh, and then what started as a month of sick leave became 8 months of sick leave with a lot of psychiatry, psychologists, and coaching as well, and a process of discovering of what I could do in my life afterwards, because that was the big question that I was trying to reply to that question. Like, I don't want to go back to tech, but like, I don't want to go back to being a designer, but I've never allowed myself to really think and be intentional about my career. I was always moving forward, somehow very reactive. And this was a point where everything come to a stand, and it's just like, now you need to think about it, right?
Wow.
A friend of mine used to say, this is the questions that our parents have when they retire, but we are having them in the mid-30s.
That is very true. 100%. I'm sure a lot of listeners are too, having that moment. How did you come to the point of deciding to sell meatballs then? What was it?
Well, the first months I couldn't do anything. I was literally looking at blank walls and, trying to do some meditation and calm down the body. I was really anxious, I was a depression and a burnout.
Yes.
And then my therapist said, you need to start doing stuff with your hands, because I was very mental, right?
Right.
I was very mental. And I think a lot of knowledge workers have this issue, right? We are very mental people. And then it's hard to disconnect because the brain never disconnects. So I love to cook. And I bought a couple of cooking books that I wanted to try. And then I find my passion for pistachio meatballs. And then I obsessively would wake up, go to the market, buy everything I need, all the products, and then spend mornings cooking 200 meatballs, and then because it was pandemic and I had people with kids, I would just froze them or bring them to home. And that's how I came up to starting doing meatballs, because my therapist said, you need to start doing stuff with your hands.
Fantastic. Okay, so do you still do meatballs? Because I didn't see that on your
I still do meatballs, but only for myself. I don't sell it anymore.
That's amazing. Okay, and so then tell us, how did you go from the meatballs now into the coaching? Because that's another
It's a big
shift. So it's
step.
like, yeah.
Yeah. So what I learned was that during these 8 months for me was I needed to experiment. I wanted to change careers, and I didn't know how. So I wanted to be a tattoo artist because I study art and I design and I draw fairly well, but that was not a career for me. The meatball in Denver was maybe I can open a restaurant and leave laptops behind. And so I did a lot of these experiments, right? And then I ended up one time my psychologist, my therapist changed gears, and I didn't understand why they changed gears with me. And then, why are you now being so active with me and pushing me to do stuff? It's just, because now I'm being more of a coach than a therapist. That is coaching? So I thought it was here, you telling me what to do. So that was a click. And that's when I started, coaching, interesting. And then I started researching about coaching. And then I was like, this might be something that I like to do, because that's the part of my job that I like, is being with people, supporting people and all of that.
Yeah.
And then started to shine for the first time in 8 months, this light of, there's a new passion that maybe I like. So that's how I started to go into coaching.
Oh, amazing. That's incredible. And so was it a linear process, or did you kind of dive back a little bit into some of the tech stuff you were doing, or was it just linear, like you decided that career is done now, that the tech is done, and now I'm moving forward fully into this coaching?
So in my mind was done.
Yeah.
Practically is not, right? And I think that's the tricky part about career changes and about is that one wants to change, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
okay, I discovered this new thing and now I want to change.
Mm-hmm.
But that rarely happens. Or if you do it too early, it kind of backfires. So, and I understood this, right? I understood that this needs to be gradual for two reasons. First, because I want to be a good coach and a good professional, and one doesn't become like that, like very, very fast.
Yeah.
And second, practically, I need time and money, right? I still need to pay my bills. So I did the weirdest thing ever, which everybody, nobody understood. I went back to the company.
The tech company.
Yeah, for exactly the same tech company, because I was still employed by then, right? I was just on sick leave. And I think they were also surprised that I went back. I think everybody there was a bit surprised. And also everybody on my private life was a bit surprised. But I understood that, you know what? If I want to do a career change, I need to do it smartly. And going for another job, I need to prove myself again. I need to start from scratch. It's just, I have no patience for that. I'm going back to that job. I'm going to ask a depromotion. I'm not sure if that's even a term in English. I demoted. Sorry, I asked for a demotion. Sorry, invented here a new word. And because I was about to go up, and I said, no, actually, I want to go down, please. And I reduced 4 days a week.
Wow.
So I became the same level of the team that I built. So I stopped being their boss. I became one of them, which was really cool and also really weird for them.
Yes. Wow.
And started coaching on the side very slowly and for another year.
Wow. And then eventually you made the transition fully. You left your job.
Then I took the leap and say, okay, let's do this.
Fantastic. And that must be scary though, to kind of leave the job security element and then now move into the sort of freelance entrepreneur world. Do you think?
But it definitely was, Nicole, especially for me, because I had quite some financial anxiety, right? And I think I also understand with this process that like what was fooling also my career was also certain beliefs in relationship with money, in relationship with work, right? So I loved security. I loved, my paycheck at the end of the day. It's like, there is this saying that plays 3 drugs in the world that is like what, sugar, cocaine, and a paycheck.
I've never heard that.
It was the three word, and for me was like the paycheck was really. So making this leap was definitely scary, but I think part of the trick was doing it strategically.
Yes. And that for you was like almost like calculated risk, if you will.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah. I like that. And so now you've been coaching for 2 years. So, and you help people when they're navigating that career change possibly, or even if they're feeling stuck. Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah. And so how do we know when we need a career change in general? Because a lot of people will have that Monday blues, right? And they're just like, oh, they're dreading. It's like, oh, Monday, because it's for fun on the weekend, to have time to yourself, do whatever you want to do. So how do we know, what would you say you can distinguish major sign point posts for us to identify?
That's a good question. It varies, and I think that's very deeply personal. I don't believe that if you have the Sunday blues, you need to change jobs, right? We always have the Sunday blues from time to time. Or if you have a bad day at work, I think it becomes one of the things that it becomes very prevalent. If the feeling becomes prevalent, right? Like I think there is this idea of meaning and this idea of growth. And it's not that the work needs to be like the end all and be all, but it needs to provide us some meaning and it needs to give some sort of growth till a certain extent.
Yeah.
And if there is not that, if this is not present in our work for a long time, I think it's a sign that something needs to change, or we don't, we just feel that we are kind of in a hamster wheel. Look, it's okay to be in a job that we don't find meaningful, or that we don't find 100% fulfilling, or there is no growth, but that job has a function in our life that allows us to do something else. It still has a meaning in a global sense, right? But I think when the job becomes too heavy, when the job becomes too draining, when it's completely meaningless, when it does not contribute anything to our life, maybe it's time to rethink what we are doing.
Yeah, absolutely. And on let's say a day-to-day basis, Sometimes I also think, I feel like I've heard, various different, very successful people share their like their lives, and whenever they've changed careers or done something significant, it was like that day to day, which I think you touched on. It's like that day to day, deeper than just, it's like dread. It's almost like energetically, depletes you going into the office, for example, or, you know, getting ready to go to that job, or even being in the job. It's like a complete depletion of your energy, your soul. Like is that something that you would also consider, like, really, because I think you did touch on this idea of like really not you feel it deep.
Yeah. I mean, ideally, one does not get to that point because
Mm,
I think, or at least that was my experience, right? When we get to that point, we are either on a burnout or on a verge, right?
mhm.
And what I have also observed with the people that I've worked with, when they come in at that point, there is also this need of, I want to change and I want to change fast, but that comes from a place of desperation, that you just want to change situations because it's too heavy and it's too depleting, as you said. But yeah, one should avoid to get to that point, because for that point, if you get there, the first thing is you need to stop and you need to take care of yourself, need to, get yourself together again so you can start thinking about what's next.
Yeah.
But um,
Because yeah, I feel like I just love the idea of having like these sort of, I know you said it's independent, but I almost feel like sometimes the body also gives us indications of like where something isn't right and we're out of alignment. Have you experienced that? Well, you experienced that obviously with your own burnout, but even before the burnout, or even with the clients that you work with, is there any physical symptoms that people experience when they should, they're on the precipice of that, major downfall, that they can look for and say, I'm getting, sometimes it's anxiety, sometimes it's a pit in your stomach. Is there anything that you can share on that from a physiological perspective?
yeah, I mean, for me, it was anxiety, non-sleep, completely dysregulated in terms of appetite and all of that. And for a lot of people that I've worked with, I think is this exhaustion. Is this nervous exhaustion. You are exhausted, but at the same time, your nervous system is on fire, and you can feel almost your body buzzing, but exhausted at the same time. And I think that's very common for people to feel. And I think that, or to experience, I think the main thing is it starts with lack of sleep. I'm not sure if it's because you interviewed a lot of people also work in health, right? And work in that space. I'm wondering what would they say in this point?
I feel like lack of sleep is such a big indication of so many like health issues. But then I guess the question is if it's chronic, right? Because I had a guest on who was talking, she's an Ayurvedic physician. And in Ayurveda, I learned that it's all about the health, like mind, body, spirit, and which I love. And I think it's really interesting because she was saying that Western medicine serves a purpose in order to help us to, when we're trying to, like, we have a pain, right? Like a temporary fix. Like, so go to the doctor, have, ibuprofen or paracetamol to ail, like with the ailment. But when it starts to become a chronic thing, that's when you start looking at what are the deeper roots of the issues. And again, how is your sleep going? How is your appetite? Like you said, anxiety levels. Yeah, I agree. I think sleep is also an interesting point of view. And yeah, I feel like whenever I'm a career changer as well. And I feel like when I have changed careers, there's this, it's like this insatiable little thing in you that keeps telling, it's your intuition. It's essentially for me, intuition that tells you like something isn't right. Like almost I described it in the past many times as I feel like I'm swimming upstream as a salmon, like salmons when they swim
Yes.
upstream. It's like it may not be horrible. It may not be so bad, like in the sense that I'm not like breaking down and whatever. But this continuous, like, I guess as you said, exhaustion but also nervousness, that sort of jittery. I like that. Yeah. Thank you, Ricardo. That's really interesting.
I was interested. I was curious about what helped you to trust your intuition in your career change.
Well, I'm a big proponent that I think the universe continuously gives us little signs of what we should be doing, and we have to try and be attuned to it. So for me, like meditation has been a really big part of my life. When I have made the right decisions, I look back and I go, oh, yeah, that was really right. I only got into meditation a few years ago. But when I did my first probably big career change, 10 years ago, I would say, that was a lot of self-reflection. So I did a lot of journaling and self-reflection and putting in my journal like thoughts and plans and so on. So I would say a lot of inner reflection goes on for me. So, but I would say in the last few years, the meditation has played a really big part in allowing me to tap into my intuition. How about you? Do you follow your intuition? Are you intuitive in that way?
I'm more nowadays than I used to be. I think
Yeah.
I always had good hunches.
Mhm.
Most of the times in my career, I had good hunches, but they were also mixed with a lot of rationale, but risky hunches.
Yeah.
But trusting when I needed to stop, trusting when I needed to change, trusting when I needed to, I can do this.
Yeah.
It took me time. I think nowadays also it's a big shift. 15 years being employed and 2 years now running my own business, because I don't consider myself a freelancer. Like I'm running my own business, right?
Yes.
You need to trust your hunches. You need to trust your intuition. I think it's been a big training ground for me to learn that. Was a lot of, is this free fall helps? Because, well, do I have any other option? I don't. But also, I think self-reflection is a big part of it, for sure. Like, for example, these 8 months when I was recovering and afterwards as well, I did a lot of self-reflection and that helped.
Yeah. And also, I like that you also reached out to other people to help you as well, which is really, really good. Like you had your psychologist, you had your coach, you had lots of different people who were helping along the way as well, which is also really nice. Because I think sometimes people feel, especially with maybe work profession and so on, they often feel very nervous about opening up and sharing with people for various different reasons. It could be cultural. It could be also like just not wanting to, you don't know who to trust in a workplace sometimes. And so, yeah, no, I think that's a really good thing that you did for yourself as well. So, okay, well, if people are listening and they are unhappy in their current jobs, right? So they don't know whether or not they want to do a career change per se, but they are not happy and they're feeling what we described, the sort of that really like either the dread, the anxiety, the sleeplessness, etc. What can they start to do to move their lives forward and make either a career change or a change in their workplace?
Yeah, give it time. I think that's the first step. For example, I identified two stages where people are in this journey of trying to find what's next in their lives. There is one stage, which is the stage of I'm ready to start an exploration and I'm ready to understand what my options would be. And there is another stage where I work with people where I have options. I just don't know which decision to make and how to go about it. So, but I think your question is more on the first one, right? What people can do. And there it's a process of exploration. It's really a process of self-reflection, because I've worked with people who come and say, look, I want to change careers. I don't know where to go. And at the end of the day, we realize they don't want to change careers. They just have a bad relationship with work, or they could have a better relationship with work as a whole, as a component of life. And sometimes can be as easy as you really have a bad boss and you needed somebody to tell you that, or to make it clear, or you need to change jobs. So it really depends. But I think one of the first things that people can do for starters is understanding, where am I now? like
Mhm.
gaining perspective of where am I now? That's the first step. And why am I feeling like this?
Mhm.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, 100%. And is there any exercises you can recommend that people do in order to start trying to assess, like, let's say on their own, whether there's anything they can start to do, questions they can start asking themselves, or any exercises you would recommend?
It really depends on the people and it really
Mhm.
depends on the situation. So I don't have like a 1, 2, 3 kind of first step. I do have a framework that I kind of follow on a more
Mhm.
high level, but then each person gets its own approach.
Yeah.
I think a lot of it starts with, for example, it's funny when you ask this question, which is even if I'm capable of and would be convenient to, I would not become or do
Wow.
because yeah,
Right. Wow. So it's almost like not reverse engineering, but in some ways, yes, like going to what you don't want to do. Because if you are in the job that you don't want to do, even if it's convenient and you can do it, then maybe you should be considering a career change essentially.
yeah.
And then you also mentioned this idea of maybe a process of trying different things. So experimenting with different things. And so is that also something you would kind of encourage people to start doing? And even in terms of like, if they're interested in like meatballs or not meatballs, but like cooking, um, taking up a cooking class.
Yeah, but that's a great point. So I work in these 4 pillars, which is more like perspective, action, transition, and harmonization. So harmonize. And the perspective part is the part of the the reflection, the questioning the self. And then there is a part of action, which is taking experiments. For example, this week actually I reconnected with a person I was working with, a client. I don't like to talk to clients, so it's always a person that I work with, just for reference. That I didn't see for 2 months.
Mhm.
So we had an interruption because she was like going, oh good, I'm going to take 3 courses in 2 things that I'm fairly new, but maybe I like, and 1 thing that I just exploring even deeper what I'm already good at.
Mhm.
And in these 2 months, and this person could have made the decision of like, okay, I'm going to take the chance and take this job and
Mhm.
see if I like it or not. But no, took 3 courses, 2 months, risk-free, and really understood I'm really good on what I am and I don't like it anymore. I don't want to go deeper. So
Mm.
I'm glad I did this course, but I don't want to go there. And these 2 new things, which was around about design and innovation, like this is really something that I realize now I was really passionate about for the last 3 years and I couldn't put a finger on. But
Mm.
this person maybe paid what, $400 for
Yeah.
these 3 courses, took 2 months after work to do this without making a big break, without making a big bet, right? This
Yes.
power of experimentation brings so much knowledge. For me, it was meatballs, and amongst others. But for this person, was a course, for example.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. That's great. Let's talk about toxic workplaces and what someone can do when they're working in that sort of environment. So it's toxic, whether it's toxic because there's infighting between senior people, or it's toxic because they have a bad boss or a boss that doesn't manage them well. And it's just become very toxic. Even colleagues, like some colleagues can be like bullies and create a very toxic work environment. What can people do instead of just like leaving? What can they do to empower themselves?
Yeah, that's a good and profound question. Let me hold my thoughts around that because I can go in multiple directions here. Um, I think the word toxic in the work environment can be used very loose, and I think there's many different layers to it, right? Uh, I think there's truly toxic behavior and truly toxic organizations that, to be honest, there's nothing you can do. You just need to get out. The
Mhm,
organization is like that, the culture is like that. You will not going to change, and
mhm,
that's I never experienced that myself per se, but I
mhm,
have friends, I have clients, or people that I work with that experience that, and there is no way. It's like being in an abusive relationship. You can change the person. You just need to leave.
mhm,
Um, Now, when it comes to perceived toxicity, I also had a big learning from my own career, because with hindsight, obviously it's always later, right?
Yeah.
With insight, I realized I was being as toxic as the persons that I was calling toxic to, right? Because I was completely lost in this drama triangle, which is kind of there is a villain, there is a hero, there is a victim, and I either was the victim or the hero, never the villain, obviously. and I understood also with some insight, there's a lot of dynamics that happen there, and what people can do is to, before calling toxic somebody, understanding like, which role am I playing here? If I would have asked this question myself at that point, I think I would have understand that, well, I also have here 50%, guilt on contributing to this dynamic.
Yeah.
And there was something different, which is the culture and organizational culture around us also didn't encourage, but also didn't prevent this kind of behavior. So when there is lack of boundaries, you really need to be you need to be very self-reflective. You need to be really in touch with, it's hard to look inside and say, maybe I also play part of this, which is my part to play. But sometimes we don't, but we need to ask this question first to ourselves.
It's almost like a self-reflection in terms of, or even self-awareness gathering. Like, am I contributing to the toxicity of it all?
Yes, or even, am I stopping it when I see it, or I'm just adding to it? I mean, I might be just at the end of receiving toxic behavior, right? But I can either put more, wood in the fire, or I can try to put some water. I'm not sure. Did you ever had to deal with something like this, and how did you deal? If you can talk.
I have definitely had toxic work environments. How do I? Okay, well, there have been environments where I just had to leave, like you said. I think one in particular, I realized that I was not the boss, and therefore I was just like in this very hierarchical environment. I was very low, and therefore it was very, very toxic, and there was lots of stuff happening that was really inappropriate. But what I realized was, I am just like the little guy, so I'm not going to change this. Therefore, I need to leave, and so that's what I did. And that is a very good. I'd been there for a while, like and I think, like you said, you give it time and you kind of assess. And then if things still aren't changing, and in fact, things are getting reinforced, that behavior, the bad behavior is getting reinforced with like reward, if you will. For me, that was very eye-opening. It was like, oh, I see. I understand this game now. Okay. And so I decided, it wasn't really my game to play. And so that is, I always try and tell anyone who's in that sort of work environment, like, you have to be aware of the parameters within where you're working. And it's different. I think if maybe it's like a smaller organization, like a mom and pop store or something. And maybe you can affect change in a more meaningful way by raising the issues directly with like the owners and so on. I think it's an element of like self-awareness, and also being aware of your surroundings and your role within that. So but it's hard. It's very hard to navigate. And sometimes you're like, it's right. It just boils down to the boss. Having a bad manager or a bad boss can just be so, and that is very difficult. It's like knowing whether is it you? Is it the organization? Is it your boss? Is it the actual industry itself? Is it, and there's so many questions to kind of answer. And then also an element of agency. Like, what do you actually want in your life? Right? Because I think it's really important to also empower someone and say, okay, this is your surroundings, etc. But like, what do you actually want? Because sometimes people are employees, but actually what they want to be is an entrepreneur. You know what I mean? And And that is like, it's such and those are very profound, meaningful mindset awakenings. You know what I mean? So
Totally. And I think when I start working with people, a lot of the first steps is dismantling a bit
yes.
all of that is it organization, the boss, until you get to what's my role and what I want. And like, because people come with a lot of guilt, people come with a lot of gaslighting feelings, I have to say, and thoughts. And you need to dismantle all of that so you can start working.
100%. And that's where you come in, Ricardo. Let's talk a little bit about quiet quitting. And I mentioned this to you before we started recording, but I had to look this up because in my mind, I'd been hearing about quiet quitting for years, and well, since the pandemic, really. And I was like, oh, it's when people just quit quietly and like nobody knows that they've left. But actually, what I realized is actually it's people disengaging purposefully, intentionally with some areas of their work and delivering maybe like the minimum of what's required within their job description, which again, I'm not saying it's good or bad. It's just more this concept of quiet quitting that has come out, and it can be very positive. There can be positive things and there could be negative things. Some of the positive things I read about was that it can help people establish boundaries in their workplace, in terms of if they're not getting, paid for additional hours, they actually say, no, I'm not working. Like, this is not part of my job description if you're not going to pay for it. And it can also help people avoid burnout in different situations. But then on the other side, I've read that sometimes, it can create a negative reputation for that person, being like, not me, this is not me saying it, it's like the article, but like, quote, lazy, or not suffering enough. Like, if the culture is one of suffering, like, why is this person not suffering enough? Like, why are they going to the gym to like go work out? It's like that sort of, which can then have a ramification on that person's reputation for being a hard worker, or giving everything to the organization, etc. So in terms of quiet quitting, I guess my question is, I wanted to know what you think about it and whether you think that employees that are maybe unhappy with their careers or not feeling valued, whether they should be adhering to or kind of jumping on the quiet quitting trends.
So regarding the organizations, if that's the question, right? I think if an organization has people doing some sort of a version of quiet quitting, they should ask themselves, why is that happening? It's always the individual. I came to learn that most of the individual behavior in an organization is mostly derivated and incentivized or result of the organization they are in. If somebody is disengaged with their work, and if somebody is saying, I just want to do my work and get out, but in a more kind of, I just want to do this and get out because I'm not getting paid enough for this, which is different than, I'm here for 8 hours and I work passionately, but I respect my boundaries, is one thing. But being disengaged with work, that's a problem of the organization. Why is this person disengaged with work? Why is this person not feeling motivated to work? Why is this person not discussing? For example, there is this idea that when your high performers or people that are really delivering in your organization gets quiet, it's a huge red flag that there is something wrong with your organization, right? And I think a lot of the people that I've worked with, and I think I also saw that myself, it's not that these people want to do quiet quitting. It's not that these people want to reduce their work. It's just they just don't feel recognized. They just don't feel. They just feel no matter what they do is never enough. That there is no recognition. There is no. We normalized as a society overworking, and business models of companies, especially in tech, rely on people being overworked for somehow to be sustainable. And I think that's, if you need to overwork people to have a sustainable business, I find that ridiculous. It's like I study arts, and even I understand that math doesn't work out, So sorry, as you can see, I'm very passionate about this topic because I understand that there is a lot of scapegoating on the worker without companies and organizations taking the responsibility. Why is that happening in the first place?
Yes, that's really fascinating. And yeah, I agree with what you're saying. I guess some people, though, on the other side, well, I'm just maybe just get your opinion. Do you think that generations, like, do you see the difference? Some people argue that like there is like a different work ethic with different generations. Would you agree with that, or is that a generalization, like a stereotype?
No, I do agree with that. I do agree with that. Of course, this is a spectrum, right?
Hmm.
But
Hmm.
I mostly work with, as we discussed before, between mid 30s, late 40s. But I also work with older people and younger people, right? And I
Hmm.
observe different relationships they have with work, and I also have a younger sister and so on.
Okay.
Um, yes, there is a massive difference, but if I need to distill it, I think so. I'm a millennial, I guess
Yes.
that's what I'm
Yes.
considered.
Yeah.
So we worked a lot for meaning,
Yes.
but somehow we would also, or that's how I felt, because that's also how I grew up. I would also be very loyal to the company that I was working for and giving it all, but needed to be meaningful, which is something that, for example, my parents doesn't need to be meaningful. Like they need to pay the job. Okay, we are loyal. And I grew up in the family business, and the family business was, I mean, the family business is gone long ago, but I still walk around in my hometown and people come to say, oh, your grandfather, your grandmother was a great
Oh,
employee. We were there for
wow.
30 years. People were
Wow.
loyal. So I grew up with this loyalty to the companies, right?
Yes. Yes.
What I see is like the millennial generation got to a point, if I need to overgeneralize it, is that
Hmm.
we gave it all and we got nothing in return.
Yeah.
We were sold a big lie in a sense.
Mm.
Our parents or in the generation X, they didn't saw that, or maybe the generation X, which is the one before me, like kids from the late 70s, early 80s, they are still collecting the fruits of their hard
Hmm.
work. The millennials are going through a crisis of, does this even matter what I do, and so on. And I think the younger generation saw their parents getting to the age of retirement with very bad retirements. So their brothers and sisters that are older millennials working hard in their careers to get to a point that they are burnout and still looking for the meaning of life, or at least work. The first one might be harder. They see pandemics, they see layoffs. It's like if I was entering the workforce, I would not trust any company that
Hmm.
says we are a great employee and we're going to have it and give you everything we promise. Because in reality, I just need to open the paper and I see, well, they don't deliver. So there is a huge crisis of faith in organizations. I mean, as much as there is in governmental organizations and political organizations, there is a belief system that is being broken apart, if that
Hmm.
makes sense. So I think it's not that they are lazy, they are asking themselves, well, I'm not profiting from my work, so why should I do it? Does
Yeah.
that
Yeah, absolutely. That's very well said. And I think that's resonates with me, and I think with my parents, like, I think also there's this element of maybe culture as well. And I've shared this before where like my parents came to Canada from Trinidad and Tobago. And I think when you come as a family that immigrates to a country, you're even more like wanting to make sure that you give your children, a better life and so on. So the work ethic is very, very strong. That's a generalization, but like I can see it with my family and friends who also had parents who came as immigrants or refugees to Canada. And there's this they instill this idea of like work ethics is very, very important. And we should be grateful that we have this job and so on. But I definitely feel like, so yeah, so like you, I'm very loyal to my employers. I always have been. But I think when you get to the point where you're like, but wait a minute, I'm giving you so much and I'm not getting anything, or I'm getting like little crumbs, then it's like, I'm not sure about that. So, and I think there is like this, yeah, kind of being sold a lie, or just an awakening, if you will. And I think there's this element of empowerment that comes with that when you say, wait a minute, like, no, I don't just have to like put my head down and take abusive environments or toxic workplaces or people who are not empowering me professionally. So, yeah, I think that is so true. And One of the questions I also wanted to ask you from your experience is, during the pandemic, so many people were leaving their jobs. Obviously, some of them were, made not well redundant, or they were put on furlough, and then they just started new jobs and they left. And it felt like a very exciting time for some people who were really taking that and like running with it. Are you seeing people coming back more to the 9 to 5 so for that sort of job security? Or are you seeing even more people taking the leap and changing careers and like starting their own businesses and, being entrepreneurial?
Both.
Both. Yeah. Okay.
Both. I think both. It also is very industry specific, I guess. I think in the tech industry, this was like really up really quick and really down from one day to another, and this destabilized a bit the market for everyone. There is an increasing number of people who are now looking for a 9 to 5 to pay the bills, right? And there is an increasing number of people who are just, I'm going to do my own thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
The people who are going to do their own thing, they have been preparing that move somehow. Mm-hmm. And then now it comes the opportunity to take the leap because the market is low or the opportunity for jobs is low, but they have been preparing. I mean, by any means, I also have seen people who said, I don't have the money, but I also don't have the job. I'm just going for it. And fair enough. Yeah. But the people who are going back to 9 to 5 that I see, there is, again, a big spectrum, but a lot of them also, they want to go to the 9 to 5 to get back on their feet, to think about what's next for real.
Yeah. Interesting. If we have some listeners who were made redundant recently, and they're struggling either to find a new job or, a sense of purpose, what advice would you offer them during this time?
Immediately as you got fired or laid off, just take care of yourself. People skip this step very often, which is normal. You wake up in the morning, you got called to a secret meeting, to a surprise meeting at 9 a.m. with your boss, and then you enter, and then it's like, oh, wait a second, there's my boss, his boss, and HR. After that meeting, people tend to, I need to start getting applications. I need to start getting my CV. They enter in this, reactive mode, which is normal. I'll do the same, but you need to take time to process this. This is a big punch. Your body is in stress. So you really need to take time to calm down, give yourself some days to process this. And I think this is a step that I see many people not doing, and just doing it in 3 weeks when they are totally exhausted and nervous, and nothing that they did really came to fruition because they were not in the right space. So that's the first one. Take care of your body and your mind. The second one, depending on the country, right? This is very country specific. So, for example, I'm unionized. I'm for workers' rights. So, if that would happen to me, I would contact my lawyers, contact my union, see how legal this was. What can I get in return? Like, don't sign any papers. That's another story. Like, don't sign any papers without contacting a lawyer and so on. Because I've been hearing, like, the last 2 years, a lot of dodgy behavior that is, borderline illegal, that you should be aware. So know your rights. So know your rights, and then be intentional with the time that you have in front of you. So, for example, in Germany, if you are laid off, you usually get 3 months of paid leave, and then you can get into unemployment, right? So I don't know. So there is a bigger timeline. If you are in a country or in a system that, I don't know, you just have 3 months, you should still take a week or two to sort your head together, and then be intentional. Also, what I see a lot of people doing is they start applying, like shooting in the dark, like trying to shoot fish in a barrel, right? So it's not good. What you should do, or what is helpful to do, not should, sorry, I should not use should, is have a strategy, be intentional. You can still it's a tough situation. Yes, it's a bit of an emergency, but you can still be intentional. You can still be strategic about where are you going to apply, how are you going to apply, and prepare yourself and create some sort of framework for yourself. You don't need to reinvent the wheel every time with your CVs, with your cover letters, with your applications. And I think a lot of people just start reactively applying to. And yeah, there is a lot of quantity, but very low on of quality.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I think that's roughly. So to summarize, is like take care of your mind and body, give yourself some time, check your rights, don't sign any papers, be strategic with the time that you have. And in this time, also include time. Looking for a job is a full-time job, but you don't need 8 hours a day to look for a job.
Mm-hmm.
You can do a lot in 4 hours a day and still take half a day to do something else. There are people, for example, that did, because I also work with unemployed people, by the way.
Okay.
And some people who are sponsored by the government, and some people, what they do next to it is like, okay, I also want to use this time to create, to think about, if I had my own business, what would that be? Because if nothing, if I cannot get a job, maybe I can create a business. So this is also another way to be intentional about it. Maybe you work 2 days to applying jobs and 3 days on your own business during a week while you're unemployed.
Yes, absolutely. That's great. Oh, such good advice. Thank you, Ricardo. Gosh, we could speak for hours, I feel, but unfortunately, we have to move on to the EnvisionAir questionnaire. And thank you so much for all of that amazing advice, though. And I really like what you said about the sharing, like that advice, that sort of process for people who maybe are either unemployed or have just been made redundant. I like that sort of two or three prong approach of, this is like self-care, then also self-reflection, and then maybe a little experimentation as well. So I like that. Yeah. Right. Okay. We're on the EnvisionAir questionnaire, and this is the final part of the podcast where we ask guests to reflect on their past, present, and future. So looking back at your, so looking back at your past, what advice, if you could give any advice to your 15-year-old self, what advice would you give?
I would say, trust more yourself. Have more self-confidence. You got this.
Oh, yes. Yeah. We all need that. We all need that little support. Reflecting in your present moment, if you could have dinner with anyone in the world tonight, who would it be?
Tonight, my grandmas, my two grandmas, for sure.
Are they still alive?
Yeah, they're still alive.
Oh, good. Okay.
I talk with them every day.
Oh, that's so beautiful. That's so nice. And are they living in Portugal?
Yes. Yeah.
Ah, lovely. Oh, very nice. And what's one goal you would like to achieve in the next 5 years?
I think I've been planning either too ahead or too short, in a sense. I think in the next 5 years, let's put it like that. In the next 5 years, I would like to have a more balanced work life in that sense. Like I love what I do, but I still work a lot, right? So at a certain point, I would like to offset that a little bit, and I would be healthier than I am now. I mean, I'm not bad, but I want to be healthier. I just told you I just joined the gym after 37 years of never doing sports.
Right.
So I think a goal of being healthy and having a stable business. It's something I would love to.
Beautiful. Well, we'll be cheering you on, watching your progress as well. So thank you. Right. Well, thank you so much again, Ricardo, for being on the EnvisionAir podcast. I know you have something for the listeners that you want to share. It's an offering that you have right now. So you want to tell them a little bit. It's something to help shape their career stories. Do you want to share with that?
Yeah. Thank you, Nicole. So yeah, I work a lot with career storytelling. So I think a lot of the things that we do in this process of reflection and thinking about who we are and where we want to go is a lot about storytelling. And I created a toolkit, which is a career storytelling toolkit that comes with a webinar and 5 templates where you go through what is this change about, what is the change in your life that you are looking for. It's a reflective exercise of where you need to draw also your superhero character, so to understand what kind of skills and superpowers do you have. The third one is more about to reflect on success versus happiness. A lot of the successes don't make us happy and vice versa. And then creating a whole library of your experiences that you can, pick. It's like a Lego system to create CVs, cover letters, but the process of doing it also brings a lot more clarity about who you are as a professional and what your strengths are. And the last one is bringing all of this together, right?
Amazing.
And people can download it on my website. It's www.ricardobrito.me/gift.
amazing.
It's
Lovely.
very
Well,
straightforward.
well, I'll definitely put also in the show notes as well. So people can hopefully just look in the show notes and click the link as well. But yeah, well, that information will definitely be in there as well. And if people want to connect with you, where are you most active? Are you in LinkedIn, Instagram, on your website? What's the best way to
Yeah.
connect?
So I'm more very active on LinkedIn. I'm also active on Instagram, and I every 2 weeks I release a newsletter called Burning Thoughts, both on LinkedIn and on Substack.
Fantastic. Well, good. Well, thank you so much again, Ricardo. You have been such an amazing guest with so much advice and so interesting. And I hope this has helped a lot of people who are listening and they're at that career crossroads trying to figure out the next step. So thank you again for everything. Sending you lots of love.
Thank you for having me, Nicole. I really had fun. Thank you so much.
If you want to see more videos like this, make sure you hit subscribe and check out this video here.